Most firearm reviews show guns under perfect conditions with clean internals, low round counts, and controlled testing that barely scratches the surface of real reliability. But the true test of any PCC starts when the gun gets hot, dirty, and pushed far beyond a casual range session. That is when weak engineering, poor tolerances, and overhyped features finally start revealing themselves. Today we are looking at 7 pistol caliber carbines that promised innovation, performance, and reliability, yet struggled to consistently deliver once shooters spent serious time behind the trigger. Some built cult followings online, while others leaned heavily on tactical marketing and flashy features. But once the round count climbed, the problems became harder to ignore. Stay until the end, because the number 1 platform costs more than almost every gun on this list, yet still delivers one of the biggest gaps between hype and real-world performance in the entire PCC market. The Hi-Point 995 TS is one of the most recognizable budget pistol caliber carbines on the market, mostly because it sits in a strange position where expectations were always incredibly low, yet the rifle still manages to surprise people once it actually hits the range. Chambered in 9mm and usually selling in the $350 to $400 price range, the 995 TS was built for buyers who wanted the cheapest functional PCC possible without stepping into premium territory. Featuring a 16.5-inch barrel, an overall length of roughly 31 inches, and an unloaded weight just over 6 pounds, the rifle uses a simple straight blowback operating system designed around affordability and ease of maintenance rather than refinement. The bulky polymer shell gives the gun an unmistakably awkward appearance, but hidden underneath is a platform that often performs better than critics expect. Hi-Point equipped the rifle with integrated ghost ring sights, multiple accessory rails, and a skeletonized stock design that at least attempts to modernize the overall package. Recoil stays manageable because of the heavy internal structure, and many owners found the carbine surprisingly accurate at short to medium distances during casual range use. The biggest reason the platform gained attention over the years is simple. Despite all the jokes online, plenty of these rifles actually run reliably enough for recreational shooting. Some owners push thousands of rounds through their carbines without major failures, which helped the 995 TS build a reputation as a rough-looking but functional budget option. Still, the rifle has always struggled with the same problems that prevented it from becoming a truly respected platform in the PCC world. The first issue is manufacturing consistency. One buyer may receive a reliable range toy that cycles smoothly for years, while another ends up fighting feeding issues, rough bolt travel, extraction problems, or inconsistent receiver tolerances after only moderate use. That unpredictability is what hurts confidence in the platform more than anything else. The trigger is another weak point, often described as heavy, gritty, and excessively long compared to competing carbines. The balance also feels awkward because the rifle is noticeably front-heavy, constantly reminding shooters that the internal design prioritized low production cost over ergonomics and handling refinement. Another major downside comes from the proprietary 10-round magazines, which completely eliminate compatibility with standard handgun magazine ecosystems that dominate the modern PCC market. Competing rifles like the Ruger PC Carbine offer better long-term durability, smoother controls, stronger aftermarket support, and compatibility with common pistol magazines, while living in a relatively similar pricing category once sales and discounts are considered. Hi-Point heavily promoted its lifetime warranty to reassure buyers, and to be fair, the company generally honors repairs and replacements when problems appear. But a strong warranty does not fully erase concerns about quality control, because most shooters would rather avoid reliability issues entirely instead of sending the firearm back after purchase. In the end, the Hi-Point 995 TS succeeds mainly because it delivers more functionality than its appearance suggests. It is affordable, simple to maintain, relatively soft shooting, and capable of dependable performance in certain examples. However, the platform never fully escapes the feeling that buying one is still a gamble on manufacturing consistency, and that compromise becomes harder to ignore once buyers compare it to better engineered PCC options available on today's market. Number 6 on our list is the Just Right Carbine, or simply the JRC. And this is exactly where our conversation shifts from mere budget limitations to deep-seated design decisions that created glaring problems right from the drawing board. On paper, this blowback-operated takedown platform sounded incredibly smart, promising shooters a highly customizable utility rifle with a total overall length of 31 to 34.5 inches, an unladen weight of roughly 6.5 pounds, and a standard 17-inch threaded barrel made from 4140 chromoly steel. The entire marketing campaign centered around ultimate modularity, offering a multi-caliber setup where buyers could switch between 9mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, or 45 ACP, all while utilizing highly abundant magazine systems from Glock or Smith & Wesson M and Amp Wink with tongue sticking out pistols. For a highly competitive current market price hovering between $650 and $750, it initially looked like an easy win for survivalists and casual plinkers alike. The standout features include a fully ambidextrous ejection port and charging handle that can be swapped to either side, a standard AR-15 specification furniture compatibility for grips and stocks, and a free-floating quad-rail handguard for tactical accessories. Looking at the pros, you get an incredibly flexible, takedown-capable truck gun that uses the same 9mm magazines already sitting in your pistol holster. However, the cons heavily outweigh the benefits, starting with a notoriously frustrating field stripping process that requires tools just to remove the bolt, alongside a total lack of a last-round bolt hold-open feature. The fatal flaw of the JRC is that modularity sounds great until every extra interface introduces another severe tolerance variable into the blowback system, which is exactly where it falls apart under extended use. Independent testing and long-term owner reports consistently highlight severe feeding issues, particularly with defensive hollow point ammunition across various magazine configurations. The problem was never just bad magazines or a standard break-in period. It was pure geometry. Once you design a mag well and receiver meant to accept multiple magazine brands and calibers, the critical relationship between the feed ramps, chamber angles, and magazine seating depth becomes dramatically more sensitive. Hollow points expose these engineering weaknesses almost immediately because the feeding path completely lacked the forgiveness found in more refined, dedicated PCC architectures. This flexibility created a massive tolerance stacking nightmare, leading to wild performance inconsistency between individual guns. While some owners swear their carbines run flawlessly, others have spent months chasing a baseline of reliability that never fully stabilized, proving that this engineering compromise was baked into the design from day one. Number 5 is the Beretta CX4 Storm. And this is probably going to upset some longtime fans because the CX4 built an incredibly loyal following over the years. At first glance, it is easy to understand why. The platform feels futuristic without becoming awkward. It stays lightweight at a little over 5 pounds unloaded, and it carries the reputation of a company with serious firearm engineering history behind it. Beretta marketed the CX4 as a refined alternative to the bulky PCC market that existed at the time. You had a 16-inch barrel chambered in 9mm, compatibility with Beretta 92 series magazines, ambidextrous controls, and a smooth shooting experience that felt more advanced than the standard blowback guns competing against it. For the first several hundred rounds, most owners walk away impressed. The recoil impulse feels softer than expected, the controls are intuitive, and the carbine handles quickly in tight spaces. But once shooters pushed the platform harder and round counts started climbing, the exact system that made the CX4 feel unique became its biggest long-term liability. The rotating barrel system sounded brilliant in theory because Beretta presented it as a cleaner and more reliable way to manage recoil and maintain smooth feeding. The issue is that the platform became extremely dependent on proper maintenance to keep that advantage alive. Over years of owner reports and extended testing, one trend kept showing up repeatedly: Shooters who failed to clean and reassemble the locking system correctly began experiencing reliability problems that more forgiving PCC platforms simply avoided. The disassembly process itself is not impossible, but it introduces complexity into a category where simplicity usually wins. Once carbon buildup accumulates around the rotating components, reliability can change dramatically if maintenance intervals are ignored or if parts are not reinstalled exactly as intended. That might sound minor until you realize most PCC buyers are not armorers. They want a platform that tolerates neglect, rough handling, and long shooting sessions without becoming maintenance sensitive. The CX4 never fully delivered that level of forgiveness. Instead, owners discovered a gun that performed beautifully when kept clean and properly maintained, but became noticeably less predictable once those conditions slipped. That gap between advertised reliability and actual maintenance sensitivity is what lands the Storm on this list. Beretta sold innovation, but innovation in defensive firearms only matters if it simplifies ownership rather than increasing dependency on perfect upkeep. Compared to newer platforms like the SIG MPX that maintain stronger long-term reputations under high-volume testing, the CX4 slowly began feeling less like an evolution and more like a platform trapped between old design philosophy and modern reliability expectations. The hardcore fan base still defends it aggressively because when the gun runs well, it genuinely feels excellent. But that does not erase the documented reality that its reliability margin becomes far narrower once heavy use enters the equation. Number 4 is the Freedom Ordnance FX9, and this platform perfectly represents how strong first impressions can hide deeper mechanical weaknesses. At first glance, the FX9 looked like one of the smartest value buys in the PCC category. It delivered the familiar AR-style layout shooters already loved, accepted Glock magazines, featured modern MLOK furniture, and came in significantly cheaper than premium platforms like the MPX. Sitting between $500 and $600, the pitch was simple. Why spend over $1,000 when you can get nearly the same practical experience for half the money? Initially, the FX9 makes that argument feel convincing. The controls feel familiar, recoil stays manageable for a blowback design, and a lightweight handling gives buyers the impression they found an affordable hidden gem. The problems begin once shooters start running the gun harder with defensive ammunition and fully loaded extended magazines. Extended testing and competitive shooting feedback exposed a recurring issue tied directly to feed geometry under stress. Specifically, shooters running 33-round Glock magazines loaded to full capacity began reporting measurable failures to feed when using hollow point ammunition. Ball ammo often masks the issue because its rounded profile feeds more easily under marginal conditions. But hollow points immediately exposed how sensitive the platform became when spring pressure, feed angle, and chamber geometry all combined at maximum capacity. This was not a random break-in problem or isolated manufacturing defect. It was a predictable behavior pattern tied directly to the platform's design limitations. Once you combine heavy magazine spring pressure with certain defensive loads, the feeding angle changes enough to create reliability inconsistencies that should never exist in a serious PCC platform. That matters because many buyers purchase the FX9 specifically for defensive applications, trusting the marketing promise that magazine compatibility and AR familiarity automatically translated into dependable real-world performance. Unfortunately, familiarity does not equal refinement. The FX9 works well enough during casual range sessions that many owners never encounter the issue until they start testing defensive load seriously. By then, the trust gap has already opened. Compare that to more refined PCC systems that maintain consistent hollow point reliability across extended magazine setups, and the FX9 begins feeling like a platform released before all the geometry problems were fully solved. The disappointment here comes from potential. The gun feels close to being excellent, which almost makes the reliability inconsistencies more frustrating because buyers can clearly see what the platform is trying to become. Number 3 is the Palmetto State Armory AKV. And this is where expectations started climbing far beyond what the platform could consistently deliver. PSA marketed the AKV as the perfect fusion of classic AK reliability and modern 9mm practicality. The entire sales pitch leaned heavily into the legendary reputation of the AK platform. You had the stamped steel receiver, AK-style controls, familiar long gun ergonomics, and the promise of rugged reliability wrapped into a pistol-caliber carbine that accepted affordable magazines and delivered soft shooting performance. Sitting around $800 to $900, buyers genuinely believed they were stepping into a higher tier of PCC quality. On the surface, the AKV absolutely looked the part. It felt solid in the hands. The recoil impulse stayed manageable for a blowback system, and aesthetically it delivered exactly what AK fans wanted from a modernized PCC. The problem is that the legendary reliability people associate with traditional rifle caliber AK platforms does not automatically transfer over into a completely different operating system. Underneath the familiar styling, the AKV still relied on a straight blowback design, and once shooters started putting serious round counts through early production guns, inconsistency became impossible to ignore. Independent testing and long-term community reports revealed substantial quality control variation between individual units. Some carbines ran flawlessly, while others struggled with feeding reliability, inconsistent barrel fitment, and cycling irregularities that appeared far too early for a platform marketed around rugged dependability. Magazine sensitivity became another recurring issue. Certain magazines worked beautifully, while others introduced reliability inconsistencies that completely contradicted the entire AK reliability narrative used to sell the gun in the first place. That disconnect is the real reason the AKV lands this high on the list. Buyers were not simply purchasing a 9mm PCC. They were buying into the emotional promise of AK durability and battlefield-level toughness. Instead, many owners discovered a platform that behaved more like a temperamental blowback carbine, wearing AK cosmetics than a true evolution of the legendary system it borrowed its identity from. The frustrating part is that later production improvements helped stabilize some of these issues, but early adopters already experienced the quality control roller coaster firsthand. Once a firearm develops a reputation for unit-to-unit inconsistency, rebuilding buyer confidence becomes extremely difficult no matter how many updates follow afterward. Number 2 is the Kel-Tec Sub 2000 Gen 2, and this gun perfectly demonstrates how one clever feature can completely overshadow a major design flaw until owners actually start living with the platform long-term. When the Sub 2000 first exploded in popularity, it honestly made a ton of sense. Here was a lightweight folding carbine chambered in 9mm that accepted Glock magazines, fit inside a backpack, and sold for roughly $500 to $600. For a lot of buyers, it looked like the ultimate practical truck gun or travel PCC. The folding design became the entire identity of the platform. Kel-Tec marketed it as the perfect combination of portability, compatibility, and simplicity. On paper, it checked nearly every box modern PCC buyers wanted. The issue is that the engineering decision responsible for the folding system directly conflicted with how most shooters actually use carbines in the real world. The optic rail was positioned along the exact path required for the gun to fold in half. That means the moment you mounted a serious optic, the carbine could no longer perform its signature feature unless you remove the optic entirely or invested in expensive aftermarket mounting systems designed to work around the factory limitation. This was not a minor inconvenience. It fundamentally broke the practicality of the platform's biggest selling point. Every serious PCC owner today runs some kind of optic setup because modern red dots dramatically improve speed and usability. Kel-Tec essentially forced buyers to choose between portability and functionality on a gun specifically marketed around combining both. Owners quickly realized they either had to accept compromise sight solutions, spend extra money correcting the issue themselves, or stop folding the carbine altogether. The fact that Kel-Tec eventually addressed the problem in later generations only reinforced what Gen 2 buyers already knew. The flaw existed from the beginning. The market simply got distracted by how cool the folding concept looked during initial reviews. Beyond the optic problem, the platform also retained a rough ergonomics and sharp recoil characteristics common to lightweight blowback carbines. It was never particularly pleasant to shoot for extended sessions, but buyers tolerated that because the portability factor felt unique enough to justify the compromise. Once the optic issue entered the conversation, though, the illusion started falling apart. Compare it to something like the Ruger PC Carbine, which achieves compact storage while preserving full optic functionality, and the Sub 2000 suddenly feels like a product built around a clever gimmick rather than a fully refined system. That does not mean it is unusable. Plenty of owners still love theirs. But there is a massive difference between a gun being enjoyable and a gun fully delivering on the promise that sold it in the first place. Number 1 is the KRISS Vector, and honestly, no other PCC on this list created a bigger gap between marketing hype and real-world performance. The Vector was not sold as just another pistol caliber carbine. It was presented as a revolutionary redesign of firearm physics itself. The entire identity of the platform centered around the Super V recoil mitigation system, which redirected recoil forces downward through uniquely shaped operating assembly. Promotional videos made the gun look almost unreal. Minimal muzzle rise, lightning-fast follow-up shots, futuristic styling, and a recoil impulse supposedly far superior to traditional PCC systems. Buyers were told they were looking at the future of controllability in compact firearms. Then came a price tag. Depending on configuration, the Vector regularly pushed between $1,300 and $1,500, making it dramatically more expensive than most competing PCC options. That premium only made the promises feel even bigger. If a company charges nearly double the price of proven alternatives, buyers naturally expect a major leap in performance. The reality turned out to be far more complicated. Once independent testing and long-term competitive shooting evaluations started piling up, a consistent pattern emerged. Yes, the Super V system genuinely reduces muzzle movement to some degree. The problem is that the actual performance advantage was nowhere near as dramatic as the marketing implied. Multiple side-by-side tests showed recoil characteristics surprisingly close to far cheaper PCC platforms once shooters moved beyond flashy slow-motion footage and focused on measurable shooting performance. The Vector absolutely shoots flat, but not flat enough to justify the massive financial premium attached to it. That alone would have disappointed some buyers, but the platform also introduced additional maintenance complexity through its unconventional internal design. Cleaning procedures became more involved, parts compatibility remained less straightforward than traditional PCC systems, and the gun demanded a level of familiarity that many casual owners never expected from a platform marketed so heavily toward tactical practicality. The result is a firearm that feels incredibly innovative during first impressions, but gradually loses some of its magic once shooters realize the real-world advantages are far smaller than the revolutionary branding suggested. That is the true reason the Vector takes the top spot. It is not a terrible gun. In many ways, it is genuinely impressive engineering. But the gap between expectation and actual performance became so massive that disappointment was almost inevitable. Buyers were promised a category-redefining breakthrough and instead received a very expensive incremental improvement wrapped inside one of the most aggressive marketing campaigns the PCC market has ever seen. At the end of the day, the biggest problem in the PCC market is not that these guns are completely unreliable. Many of them can run well, and plenty of owners have fired thousands of rounds without major issues. The real problem is the gap between marketing hype and long-term performance. Companies love using words like revolutionary, duty-ready, and ultra-reliable, but true reliability only shows itself after high round counts, heat, fouling, and extended use begin stressing the platform. A fancy recoil system means nothing if the advantage barely exists in real shooting conditions. A folding design loses value if optics ruin the concept entirely. Too many reviews focus on first impressions instead of durability over time. So now I want to hear from you. Which PCC do you think is the most overhyped? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more honest firearm breakdowns.